Hi, guys. It's Mrs. King, and I am going to be talking to you today for a few minutes about the use of quotation marks when you are reading and when you are writing. Yesterday, you watched a video that kind of introduced how to use them, but today I'm going to give you a few examples myself, and then we're going to talk about where the quotation marks go. I'm actually going to use the book that we've been reading, Third Grade Angels, and I'm going to pull some quotations out of that book, and then we'll talk about how that looks. So first of all, what are quotation marks? Well, when we are talking and we're having a conversation with somebody, if we were to write that message down, we would use quotation marks to show that people are having a conversation, that they're talking. And when you're reading a book, you see quotation marks a lot as characters are speaking to each other. They're having a conversation. So for example, in our book at the beginning, Mrs. Sims, the teacher, was addressing the class, and she said, "Good morning, angels." And so how that looks in the book is you would see, I'm going to type it here on my screen, and you can be able to see it. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. All right, so good morning, angels. So I'm first of all going to type that sentence, and there, I believe there was an exclamation mark at the end of that. Now, since she was talking, we're going to put the quotation marks around the words that she said. So I'm going to put them around or at the beginning of before the word good, and it's the key. The key on your keyboard is to the left of the enter button, and you have to hold down the shift and then push that button. It has a comma and then the quotation marks above it. Good morning, angels. Then we're going to put another set of quotation marks at the end of what she has said. So after the word angels and even after the exclamation mark. So I'm going to do shift quotations again, and there it is. That's how it would look in a book. Now, sometimes in a book, you see other words after a quotation that tells you who was talking. For example, when Mrs. Sims was talking, she might have used the word shouted. Good morning, angels, shouted Mrs. Sims. Okay, so we don't put the quotation marks around this part because Mrs. Sims didn't say that. Okay, in a book, the author was writing that to show you, the reader, who was speaking. But we don't put quotation marks around those words because, again, Mrs. Sims wasn't saying that in the story. Okay, we only put them around what's being said. Okay, so I'm going to do another example and show you a little bit different kinds of punctuation in the use of quotation marks. Okay, for example, return down a couple of times. When Mrs. Sims was talking to the class, she says, "Let's talk about angels for a minute." I pulled that directly from the book. Okay, so again, I'm going to go ahead and type what she said first. Let's has an apostrophe because it stands for let us. Let's talk about angels for a minute, said Mrs. Sims. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I just type that out. I put a period at the end of the sentence, and now we're going to punctuate it using commas and quotation marks. Okay, first of all, what did Mrs. Sims say? Well, usually I can find that if I find the word shouted or find the word said or whispered or exclaimed or laughed. There's lots of different ways that an author can show that someone is talking. So here we have the word said. So that means everything before that word is what was actually spoken. Okay? So now also when you're talking about quotation marks, commas are also used. We will put a comma right after the word minute that kind of separates what Mrs. Sims said from the part that shows she was talking. Let's talk about angels for a minute, said Mrs. Sims. And it means to pause. So we're going to pause just a second before we read on. Okay, so we do need the use of that comma. Then we're going to add the quotation marks. Where do they go? See if you can pause this video and decide. All right, hopefully you figured it out. Well, the first set is going to go before the word let's. So I'm going to do a shift quotation marks. That shows that's where she began talking. Let's talk about angels for a minute, said Mrs. Sims. Okay, there's that word said again. The quotation marks are going to go after the word minute and after the comma. So they will go there. Oops, wrong one. That was a colon. There we go. All right, so there is the second set of quotation marks that goes after what Mrs. Sims spoke. Okay, one more example. I'm going to return down. Whoops. Just a couple more. And I'm going to scroll that up a minute. There we go. Sometimes the person who's talking, that appears in the middle of the sentence. So I'm going to give you an example of what that might look like. So again, we'll use Mrs. Sims as our example. She might have said, it's time to go to lunch, said Mrs. Sims, because, let's do this, because we are very hungry. All right, and it auto-fixed that C. We're going to make it a lowercase because we stretched out that word. Okay, so here we have the part that says said Mrs. Sims, and it comes in the middle. Okay, how do you do a punctuated quotation like this? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find that word said. Okay, this is the first part of what she spoke. It's time to go to lunch. Okay, she spoke that. So I'm going to add my comma right after the word lunch. Okay, and I'm also going to put the quotation marks around those words. So right before the word it's, and right after the word lunch and the comma. Okay, now she did not say, said Mrs. Sims. That's who was speaking. Okay, but then she continues what she's saying down here. Because we are very hungry. She said that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add another comma after her name. And then since she is speaking again, we're going to add another set of quotation marks before the word because. If I can return that down. Okay, and then after the word hungry. Okay, because she spoke at the beginning, then we see the part that interjects that says who was talking, and then she speaks again. So we have to actually use two sets of quotation marks within that quotation, within that sentence. So those are some examples of quotation marks and how you might see it in a book, or if you're writing it and you're writing a story, then you may need dialogue as your characters are speaking to each other. So there's a little mini lesson on how to do that. Hope it helped.